I left Christianity. Now, why am I even making this video? First of all, I have to come up with some kind of introductory video, for my channel. You know what I'm saying. Um, I just think this topic is really, well, topical right now. Christianity is kind of in a state of, I would love to say that it's growing and that it's also dying, because we see a lot of these studies that are showing that, Gen Zers are not going to church as much. Church attendance is going down. And there's many reasons for that I won't get into. But I can't say either of those, because Christianity is just it's taking a shift. And I need to tell my story with Christianity. Now, I'm not gonna lie to anybody and say, "Oh, I had a terrible experience. Oh, it was terrible." Actually, my story with Christianity was actually pretty positive overall. If I look back, my experience in church or anything like that, it was actually very positive. I always had very nice people surrounding me. I mean, sure, there were little things that I'll get into. But just for a little background, I grew up in a Baptist church. Now, I know some people think a Baptist church, they think there does seem to be a little bit of a stigma with that, but we're not talking a Southern Baptist. We're talking about a Northeastern Pennsylvania Baptist church, a normal small town Baptist church. And I had nothing really but good experiences when I was a kid. I'm talking about from when I was, I guess, or as old as I could have been, 5 years old, whatever, and then all the way up until middle school. And I actually went to a Christian school at that time, and at that time, the Christian school was in the actual church before they moved. They moved downtown to a bigger building, their own independent building. So that's a thing. And yes, I was bullied a little bit more at the Christian school. I actually just recently, I was at a local brewery here, and kind of ran into a guy I used to go to school there with. Hadn't seen him in years, and we talked and everything, and I didn't even think anything of it. I just didn't care at that point, But when he went to leave, he apologized to me. He actually said, "Hey, man, like, when we were kids, we kind of treated you like trash, and I just wanted to say sorry." And I was taken aback by that. But I have to admit, it all came rushing back, and I thought, "Oh yeah, I get it." But I forgave him. It's no big deal, dude. But that was really the only negative experience. I mean, there was one time when I had this Harry Potter sweater, and of course on this it has the Harry Potter logo, the text, and then it has depicting people on brooms flying around. And it's funny because a lot of the teachers at the Christian school, they didn't really care. No one cared until somebody tattled on me. They went home and they said, "Oh my God, someone was wearing a..." Well, they wouldn't have said, "Oh my God," because that's taking the Lord's name in vain. They said, oh my Lord, someone's wearing a Harry Potter t-shirt. That's demonic. Someone tried to tell me that Pokemon was demonic and it actually meant little demons. Silly stuff. But other than that, I had a very positive experience, and I had a lot of good feelings about it. I mean, sure, when I first came to Christ, when I was a young kid, I went to one of those baseball camps that was Christian based. We played a little bit of baseball, and then at the end there was a speaker, and he talked about Jesus, and he told us, I mean, it's pretty heavy to tell kids, but it's like, hey, essentially he said, "Look, guys, if you die tonight, you don't know where you're going to be going." It's messed up to tell little kids this, but that's what they believe. And I remember that night, I accepted Jesus into my heart. I got saved. And this is not a unique experience, but of course, I had many other times throughout my childhood where I had moments of, I don't know, some sort of emotion, and I would renew my relation. It's like it's like a subscription, a membership. Like, okay, I got to renew my contract with God. I got saved like 20 different times, probably. Um, I have a little bit of OCD, so that started early. And I just think that honestly, Christianity, I think it only reinforces it. I wouldn't say it causes OCD, but it certainly doesn't really help as much, depending on who you are and how you look at things. Um, but overall, a great experience from first grade to fifth grade in the Christian school. And my mom gave us the opportunity when middle school came around. She wanted to put us in public school for one semester because it was the public school district that she went to. And she said, look, I want to have you try public school. And then you'll get to decide at the end of that semester, you'll get to decide whether you go back to the Christian school or you go to public school. And when I say we, I mean me and my sister. And we both decided that we were going to stay in public school. And that's when we started worshiping Satan. But no, but from then on in, we were in public school, and I honestly, I gotta be real. I made more friends in public school. I was able to find my people in public school so much more. Now, granted, that's because there were more people. So statistically, it would make a lot of sense. So I'm not going to act like I can't bash Christian school just because of that. But I actually, honestly, I got bullied less in public school. I got looked at as, not being normal, but at the very least, when I say bullying, I shouldn't say bullying. I just realized I need to kind of specify what I mean by bullying. I'm not saying getting my head shoved in a locker. I'm not saying physical bullying, getting beaten up. It was more just like getting made fun of and people thinking you're weird, being treated like you're weird, being treated a certain way. Now, I'm not going to say that stopped when I went to public school. Of course, no, it did not. But from my memory, it really, it just wasn't as bad in public school. But I need to fast forward here through things. Um, so I went through public school, and guys, for many, many years, I did not think about Christianity or Jesus at all. Not even just like maybe a little bit here and there. I would go through some rough times, some scary moments in my life, and yeah, I would. When you're in terror, you go back to God. You think, oh, okay, well, God, you become helpless. You become so frightened, you pray out to God. And that happened a couple times, but overall, I didn't even care. And we're talking about from sixth grade all the way until a few years ago. That's a long time. I was in sixth grade, to give a timeline. I was in sixth grade from about what? Yeah, 2006 grade to now is like 2004, 2005 ish, all the way up until, like I said, until the end of high school. But I'm saying my period without God went from then 2004, 2005, all the way till about 2022, roughly. And so all those years without God. And then, of course, the pandemic happened. And life fell apart for a lot of people. It fell apart for me. I kind of went into a really bad mental state. Lost my job, had to move back in with my parents first because they cut my hours at my job. So, and I was living in Philadelphia at the time, and I had to leave my apartment and I just moved back in. I was working from home anyway, so I could work from anywhere, really. Could have went to the frickin' Bahamas and worked, probably. But moved back in with the parents, and then 2 months later was let go. Budget cuts, the whole 9 yards, COVID. I didn't realize it at the time, but it really shook up my life and my self-esteem for sure. Because I was in a different career. I was in a, video production career. And it took uh, it took a bigger chunk out of me than I thought. But I came back to my hometown, and that's where I still am now. And I work at a warehouse. Just I had to just get my life back on in gear. And it was good for I'd say for the first year and a half, 2 years. It was actually really nice. It was comforting. I got to be closer to my family more, and going back to small town life. It was actually it was very enlightening in a sense. Um, but unfortunately, my job, and I'm still at that job, and I don't hate it or anything. But one of the big problems with it is it's just, I need to be mentally stimulated. I need to have. I like to solve problems with my mind. I like to think. I like to organize, and my job doesn't necessarily satisfy that. And you're there for, I work 4 10s, so you're there for 10 hours a day, and it's mind-numbing work. And so I started going on this journey in my head, just like, that's when I started having deeper thoughts about life and the meaning of life. And I started, and also this coincides with, obviously, our brains aren't fully developed until we're what, 30, somewhere in that range. There's science behind that. And I think that had to do something with it too. But I just started having these very deep thoughts, existential thoughts. And I did start looking into religions a little bit more. And I came back to Christianity. And that happened over many months. I'd say like late 2022-ish, and then all the way into 2023. It was this time where, you know, I was going through some things with a girl, but then also there was also, I was trying to get back out of my field and change jobs, and nothing was working. It was just very bad. And I think that if you take all these things and you add them up, I just found myself in a place where I felt like my life had no meaning anymore, and I was lost. I didn't know where I was going. I don't know where I'm going. I'm just thinking of Chris Farley and Tommy Boy. But I found Jesus again. And it was one of those things where I don't know if I actually believed in the whole hell thing, or I needed to be saved, although I still believed that because of my childhood, deeply ingrained. But I found a new way to love, and I think one of the reasons I went to also was I didn't have very good relationships, and so what I really wanted was, I wanted to improve my relationships with people. I wanted to have something deeper. And there were a lot of rewards going back to Christianity and coming back to Jesus. There were lasting impacts, even for now. There was definitely something good about it. But the only problem was that there was also the bad part, and it definitely made my OCD a little bit more rattled, and any anxieties, different thoughts. And I could go into all that, but I won't here. I might at the end of the video, but I remember I started changing my music to Christian music and not worship music, because that was just too, it's just too, I don't know. I don't know. But I found, I'm into rock and metal, so I found rock bands and metal bands that were Christian, and that was kind of my way of saying, see, I'm being a good, being a good Christian. And by the way, some of that music I actually still like listening to. It's just some of the lyrics are, it's hard because I go back and listen to them, and I'm like, because there's certain lyrics that are problematic to me now. But I, late 2023 all the way to early 2025, I was posting about Jesus on Facebook, and I even, I joined a Bible study again, and I started going to a church, not for very long, but I started kind of just going, oh, this, I was convinced, guys. I was like, yes, this is going to be my life. It's going to be about Jesus. This is my purpose. And all along I had questions, and many of these questions just, they didn't make sense. And there were certain things that, as I went to Bible study more, and certain theology that just didn't make sense and just sounded messed up, you know? Um, there are some things that have been answered for me, not from other people, but just me thinking and, processing. There are actually some things that make sense to me now. But then, unfortunately, what happens is it just adds more questions as you come across a new idea that, oh, or an old idea that now makes sense in the framework. I've just had more questions. Um, but I always felt like, and this is a theme throughout my life, I have always felt like I never fit in. And when I went to this Bible study, this church just didn't feel like I fit in. That we all were united under Jesus, but there were just ways that it operates that I just didn't really agree with, and all of that. And then, I always had questions. I always had questions the whole time. But it's almost like I forced myself. I'm like, no, I gotta do this. And but it's funny. There's two sides of our brains, and there was actually a study done. I apologize. I do not have the paperwork, or I don't even know what you would look up. Maybe if you would Google like study where they connected uh, electrodes or nodes to both sides of the brain, and they ask questions, something like that. But this study that was done, I don't even remember what year it was done. I heard about it on a podcast, actually. It was actually a Christian podcast I was listening to. And this study was done where they connected, electrodes, nodes to both sides of the brain. And they asked these people a series of questions, and it could be anything. It could be, what's your favorite football team? Do you like pizza? But one of the questions they asked was, do you believe in God? Now, I don't think they specified the Christian God. I think they just said, do you believe in God as a general sense? And one side of the brain said no, but the other side of the brain said yes. So, and it's funny because in scripture, there's even talks about being double-minded. And it's like, well, we are double-minded. Our brains can't, we are conflicted even in our natural brains, which is funny and scary all in the same. But I had both sides. I had times where I believed, and then other times where I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And it's this battle between your spiritual, more emotional, deep self, and then your more rational, logical side. And I'm probably not even gesturing to the right side of my brains, that I am not educated in brain. I'm not overly scientific, so I'm actually getting there. I'm getting more into science now, um, but at one point, I was starting to have this idea that like something's just off. And, there's certain things I'm not ready to let go of and all that stuff, and not sins, but it was more so the idea that like, I don't know, I feel bad for listening to a certain type of music, watching certain movies and whatnot. And then there's a podcast I listened to called The Dollop. I recommend it. It's like a comedy history podcast, and they told this story about the third wave. And you can actually go watch a documentary about this. It's called The Lesson Plan. But the third wave, and I don't want to spoil anything, but let's just say essentially the third wave it was a teacher that did an experiment on his students, and essentially he convinced his students that they were part of some underground political movement. And that's it. That's all I'll give you. And there was like an analogy between that and Nazi Germany, with Hitler. And I heard this story, and I remember thinking to myself, what if this is me? What if I'm the one brainwashed? What if I'm the one that's just being completely programmed? Or maybe I already was programmed from a young age. And so that was almost like a subconscious, it was almost like a subconscious permission to question. And so I did. And I slowly started, losing a little faith. Well, losing faith. I wasn't going to church anymore. I didn't go to the Bible study. That happened long before I ever deconverted. I have to say that my life got better in many ways. Not always, but there were certain things that I went into learning more about evolution and based on archaeological finds and everything about how we used to be. I mean, we're Homo sapiens, but we've evolved through different variations of that, and how we traveled, and we were hunters and gatherers, and how we adapted to certain situations. And I just came to this realization that we're not evil people. We're not evil. I don't believe that. I really don't believe anyone's truly evil. I know we usually say that about certain people, but that have done heinous crimes. But I think that I'm just coming to this conclusion, and I could be wrong, but we're kind of, I don't want to say helpless creatures, but we're just creatures that have been plopped into a world that's just kind of messed up, and it's not perfect. A world that you can say all you want about, oh, we use our free will and that's why everything's bad. And I'd say, no, I don't believe that. Is cancer is that a result of free will? Is disease a result of free will? Natural disasters, tornadoes, hurricanes, thunderstorms, massive calamities that have happened, volcano eruptions that happen, earthquakes, the Ice Age. Was that because of free will? I mean, it's not, but that's what I'm saying is it's ridiculous. I just think it's ridiculous to think that everything went to hell just because of man's free will to not listen to God. I mean, I actually don't believe that religion and science are opposed to one another. I don't think they are, but I think in some cases they are, and I think that's one of them. From what we have learned about the world and how we evolved and how things have changed, that's totally, in my opinion, at odds, with each other. And I will say recently, because I mentioned earlier about how there's some things that I have come to find out. One major development I've had recently is actually the idea of faith. I didn't understand it at first, but I kind of understand it now. It's, my mom, this is funny. I haven't come out of the non-Christian closet yet with my mom. And she got me this book because she knows I struggle with some OCD, anxiety, and everything. She gave me this book of how to experience God's peace in an anxious age. And I thought to myself, first of all, the fact that this book even needs to exist is problematic all on its own. The fact that come on, like the fact that we talk about the Holy Spirit and the power of the Holy Spirit. No, the Holy Spirit's not that powerful. If the Holy Spirit was, in my opinion, if the Holy Spirit was so powerful, I wouldn't need to try this hard to relate with God. Regardless. But I will say I just took a glance at this book, and there was one thing that popped out to me, and it was the idea of, we try to control our lives so much. We want to be in control of our lives. And I have to admit that struck me. That struck me at a deep level. And I realized that, you know what? I really do try to control my life. I get angry at things that are out of my control. you know, I want to control things. Now, granted, Christianity is not the first thing that ever figured that out. I mean, damn, philosophers figured that out. But the idea of faith and just having faith that, things will work out, things are going to happen as they're meant to, or, maybe you'll be able to handle it, whatever, being grateful. I understand that more now. And it is a scary thing because it is hard to let go it's hard to just, hey, whatever. I can't control everything. And it scared me a little bit because I thought, oh shit, like, what if Jesus, I kind of thought like, well, what if I'm wrong? What if I should go back to Jesus? But the thing is, it's like when you think about the story leading up to Jesus and, why he had to die, it's still messed up. To me, it's almost like it's almost like in order to get the true benefit out of Jesus, you almost have to forget everything before him. You have to forget all the messed up stuff and how we're sinners and he had to die for us because we were so bad. We were so bad that God had to sacrifice himself to himself and all this stuff. You almost have to forget all that messed up stuff. And, I truly think that the God of the Old Testament is just not a good God. And he's not worth worship, and he's a terrible parent. And it's almost like in order to take Jesus on his own and just, you have to almost forgive God. It's like we think we're the ones that have to be forgiven, but honestly, I would almost argue that God, the Christian God, is the one that needs to be forgiven because of how he was so impatient with his creation that he knew was gonna mess up and still got angry and cursed the ground, cursed the serpent, cursed the animals. It's I've come to that realization, but I have to say the one thing I will say from Christianity that I have come around to, it is the faith aspect. There's many different ways you can find that too. But I wanted to make this video because obviously it's an introduction to the channel, because you're going to get this channel. I'm not just going to talk about religion. I'm going to talk about a bunch of other stuff. I'm going to talk about just thoughts and dating. Definitely that's a thing. Just different world events, with time, I like talking about, if anyone wants to hear me talk about football or pro wrestling or something like that. I can do anything I want. I can do anything I want with this channel. It's going to be fun. But I don't want to turn anyone away from religion. And I have to be honest, I'm always going to be sympathetic to Christianity and Judeo-Christian values. And it's because that's how I grew up. I grew up with that. And when something is so near and dear to you when you're a kid, it's always going to be there. It's just how you were wired. It's always going to be a thing for you. And it's always going to be a thing for me. That I don't think I'm ever going to fully be able to eradicate, and religion is not a bad thing overall. There are many wonderful things about Christianity, about Islam, there's some lovely things. It can build community. It's almost like a fast track to building community. Some of the values are wonderful. To this day, there's so many great Judeo-Christian values that I'm like, yes. But then it gets into the homophobia and, even with trans, like that's not God's design. Don't masturbate. They hate sex. Leaving, if you're someone that is trying to leave religion, it is hard. I'm not going to lie to you. It's hard. It's difficult. especially if you grew up with it, and maybe you're like me and you came back or whatever. It's going to be hard because it's like a default setting. It's like when you were a kid, you were given this default setting to go back to, and then you try to go out of there. And really it comes down, what I'm learning is it comes down to your own self-confidence and your own value, which religion inherently messes with your own self-esteem, because it's like, oh, you're helpless, you need Jesus, and I would argue, well, no, I don't think I need Jesus. I think I need people. I need to have friends and community. And I think that's one of the things with me too, is that, as you grow up, and if you're single and you don't have kids, or, you're going to be lonelier because most people are starting families and everything. Now, I will say, by my own admission, I'm a little bit of a guarded person. So, I definitely shield myself too much. But now, if you're someone who's religious, that is a Christian, and, if you hear what I have to say, and maybe you're saying, oh, you just wanted to sin, you hate God, which those two things, see, I'm not one of these people that's going to deny those things. Like, yeah, are there certain things I don't want to give up? Yeah, but it's not drinking, smoking, and hurting people. No, it's just like sometimes I want to be allowed, I want to have permission to be angry about things, or to be sad, or to be human, but, and then you just wanted to sin, you hate God. Well, in a sense, yeah, because he's a dick. If you look into the Old Testament God, I think he's an asshole. So, yeah, maybe I do hate God. Doesn't mean I love Satan. Maybe Satan gets a bad rap. I don't know. But it's, there's a lot of different reasons that people leave religion. And sometimes there are bad reasons. Like, some people have a bad religious experience with the church or anything, and they go, oh, I left because of people. It's like, well, I will admit that's not the greatest reason to leave. And maybe that's just me being biased, because I didn't leave because of people. Even when I came back to Christianity, I went to that church, and the Bible study, those people were super nice. I would still love talking to them today. But it always goes back to Jesus. And it's like, I can't relate with that, Even when I was a Christian. Now I was in it. Even when I was in it, we'd be talking. Like, there was one time when people from the church, there was a wing night. Someone at our church owned a bar. And we went to the bar and had wing night. And of course, we do a prayer before we eat. And the prayer was great about, Lord, help us to have great fellowship together. And those good feelings come in, and you're like, woo, yeah, it's going to be so relaxing and all love. And then, the pastor, or, the guy who's doing the prayer, he's like, and let us have this gathering be centered around you. And I just went, it was like a buzzkill. It's like, oh yes, we have to make sure that we're not distracting from Jesus. We have to talk about Jesus more, and how great he is, which, it sounds like Jesus is so great, but in the end, I just don't think he is. My version of Jesus that I followed, yeah, he was. He was great. He was like a great friend, but that's the problem. He's not really supposed to be your friend. He's your God, but then you add on all the stuff from the Old Testament, and apparently he was there the whole time, and when all this messed up stuff was happening, and it's a mess. But this video has gone on too long, so hope to see you for the next video. I guess my last thing to say is, I don't want to encourage anyone to get away from religion, because it can be very beneficial for people. And it was beneficial for me in many ways, but there were downsides, and there's going to probably be downsides. You have to choose what you want to do for yourself. And I'm a little bit more of an emotional guy, and I let my emotions get the best of me, and it's the emotion that draws me back. And I always have to remember, hey man, it might not be worth it. There's bad parts. I certainly don't want to let emotions, pull me into something, but if you need to just make decisions for yourself. Um, at the end of the day, life is just something where there is no perfection. There is no utopia. You have to, whatever choices you make in life, you have to be willing to accept the bad parts, the pros and cons, and you get to decide what you want to deal with and what you're willing to endure. So that's really it. That's life. Pick your poison.